Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic? Let's do it. Travelers of Reddit, what's the creepiest thing that has happened to you while traveling? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I went to visit Ukraine with my parents because they wanted to see the small villages where their parents were born. We have no family in the area, so we hired a guide to take us around since the country can be a bit corrupt. As we were driving around on a highway, we suddenly stopped in traffic, literally in the middle of nowhere. The guide gets out of the car and takes a look, then quickly jumps back in the car, does a U-turn and drives off, telling my mom we can't go to her mom's village. We ask why, and he says there was some kind of Russian Millennium roadblock. This was during the whole Crimea thing. A shorter version of a long tale. I got my phone pickpocketed on a subway in New Delhi. I was able to grab one of the thieves. He didn't have my phone. A mob of random commuters beat the living F out of him at the next stop. The police arrived and continued to beat the shit out of him with cricket bats. We took him to the police station, told him to call his friend who had the phone. Friend wouldn't come. Police closed the door to their office with the thief, and I just hear screams. I wait and wait. A police officer brings the kid into my room with a black plastic bag, throws the kid on a dirt ground, opens the bag, pulls out my phone from a bag of curry. He throws the curry on the ground and makes the kid eat it. Even gave him a spoon. I got my phone back though. 1992, I was walking up the stairs to the ticket booths in Warsaw, Poland Central train station. All of a sudden, this dude is falling down the stairs, coming to rest a few stairs above where I was standing. Dude had a long screwdriver sticking out of his abdomen. I had a pack of wild dogs chase me from bus stop to my hotel at 3 a.m. in Kosovo. I also had an old woman yell at me in Russian about not making my bed right on the train, and then watch over my shoulder until it was to her satisfaction when I was on my way back to Bucharest from Moldova. I was traveling in Nicaragua several years ago when I got lost and ended up having to take a taxi at 9:30 p.m. back to my hostel. When the taxi pulled up to the curb, the taxi driver locked the taxi doors and told me that I had misunderstood the fare. He claimed I owed him $100, which was several times more than we had agreed upon. I tried to pry the doors open from the inside, but was completely trapped. Thankfully, he let me out of the taxi after taking all the money I had on me. The hostel workers told me I was incredibly lucky. A few days earlier, a taxi driver had kidnapped another young female, assaulted her, and then dumped her barely conscious body in a field outside of town, thinking that she was dead. A few local school children found her on their way to school in the morning. I got pickpocketed by a group of 3 on a Paris metro. I'm paranoid about losing my wallet, so I'm always checking myself. When I realized it was missing, I made a bigger scene than the pickpockets were making. They shoved me into their friend and were trying to convince people I knocked him down. I stopped the train from leaving the station. One of the other passengers left to go get a conductor and security. I guess that didn't sit well with the pickpockets, so they gave me back my wallet and took off running. I was stalked by a guy while walking through the Tiergarten in Berlin. I was walking a path enjoying the park alone. I saw this guy standing on the edge of the walkway just looking off in the distance. I passed him, and when I was about 20 feet away, he turned and followed me, keeping pace. I started to take a very meandering path, even leaving the park and entering again. The guy stuck with me the whole way. Eventually, I got to a place with some sharp turns and heavy greenery. I was able to lose my line of sight and put myself up against a corner. I'd just been in Switzerland and had bought a pocket knife, so I opened the blade and held it inside my jacket pocket. I stood there waiting, and then this guy came walking out of the path, confused and obviously trying to see where I went. When he finally spotted me, he jolted, and since I had the drop on him, he played it cool and continued walking as if he hadn't followed me there. He stopped a little ways ahead, and I kept watching him. I wanted to confront him to find out why he'd followed me, but since I was a visitor in the country, I thought better of it. Instead, I waited until I saw a big group of people leaving and fell in with them. He started to follow me, but I finally lost him outside the garden. It unsettled me because to this day, I have no idea why he was following me. I'm a guy, and at the time I was in my early 20s, pretty fit, and had a sour disposition. So I didn't seem like a prime mugging target. Maybe he thought otherwise. I was on a flight once going into Orlando that hit some unexpected turbulence. This was not ordinary turbulence. We went from 0 to 100 in an instant. People literally flew out of their seats. Luggage fell from the overhead bins, and people screamed like they were going to die. There were several sudden drops in elevation, strong enough that people's arms flew up in the air, and my butt came out of the seat. I've flown quite a bit, and sometimes it gets bumpy. This was the first time I seriously thought something bad was going to happen. I was staying in a weird hostel by myself in Barcelona when I woke up to a man staring at me while I slept. He was looking over one of those wood dividing screens that the shared room had. I pretended to still be asleep because I'm afraid of what he would do if I moved or confronted him, and I don't know if there's anyone else in the room. He stared for like 2 hours, until finally my alarm rang because I had to take an early train. So I put all my stuff in my bag and left the room. As I left, I told the owner, but I was really in a hurry and didn't ask what he was going to do with the guy. Hiking in Juarez, Peru, we had been told to watch our gear as locals and apparently foxes might make off with items left around the campsite. So we made sure to clean the campsite extra well, packing all of our gear in the tent and inside the fly. And after a long day of hiking, off to bed. In the middle of the night, our tent starts shaking like crazy. I wake up freaking out thinking we were getting robbed, and I start yelling and screaming. Part of the tent pushes in really far. I managed to get outside to start swinging and come face to face with the cow that had wandered into the tent ropes and got startled. I'm pretty lucky that it didn't step down into the tent and hit us. A friend and I were waiting for a night train in Naples, and after someone tried to steal our bags, we decided to go everywhere together. It was a good thing because a man who had been whistling at us for an hour tried to follow us into the bathroom. I was walking around in a town in Algeria. I wandered into a neighborhood and noticed there were hardly any people out. A little further, and there were literally no people out. I started to feel a little uneasy, and then I see an extremely tall man walking towards me, straight towards me, obviously with intent. He gets closer, and I see an older gentleman with a long gray beard and wearing a gray tunic. I stop. He comes right up to me and says, in pretty good English, "You are not safe here. We need to get you off the street." I say, "Okay," and he says, "Follow me." We walk a few blocks, and we come to a door. He says, "Wait here a minute." He goes inside. He opens the door again and invites me in. When I get inside, there are maybe a dozen men. They're all dressed in black, and they're staring absolute daggers at me. Graybeard lays into them, starts shaking his fist at them, and gets really worked up. Then one of the younger guys goes into the kitchen and brings out some tea and cookies and offers them to me. So I'm drinking tea and trying to smile, and one of the young guys asks where I'm from, and I say the States, and he starts talking about the CIA and stuff. And then I say, "You think the CIA is bad here? Let me tell you about Central America." And then pretty soon everybody is warming up to me, and we're laughing and talking shit about American foreign policy and drinking tea. After a bit of that, the older man invites me back to his apartment. He has a huge library. I gave him a book that I had finished, and then he tells me what just happened. His little brother, who was one of the younger men, was the leader of a radical group, along with all the other men I had met. He had overheard them getting ready to kidnap me, but he had shamed them for not being good hosts and for disrespecting him because it was his house. He said that I would be safe from them on. TL, DR, Gandalf saved my life and got a copy of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance for his trouble. That's a pretty wild story, and I'm glad it turned out alright because the setup sounded pretty scary, so glad you're alright. In India, our bus rounded a corner in the mountains and another bus was on the other side of the curve. Both buses skidded to a stop about 1 foot from one another. Both drivers started laughing and poking fun at each other. We saw a bus from the 80s that fell down the mountain about 15 minutes later. Hella intense. When I was a kid, my dad used to lead groups of college kids to Central and South America to build houses. One year, he decided that we should ride the chicken, but from Guatemala City to Mexico City, a long trip. We got to the border, and a soldier with a hell of a big machine gun got on the bus and looked around. I saw that we had about 15 college girls on the bus, and then I went and talked to someone on the phone. About 2 minutes later, a bunch of guys with machine guns got on the bus and informed us that all the males had to get off the bus and line up in front of it. I remember that we did it, but there was a hell of a lot of tension in the air as we did. Soldiers crammed into the bus. We waited. Finally, they got off the bus and we got back on and away we went. It was a whole lot of nothing, really, but I remember my dad, the leader of the group, looking very pale and sweating bullets. We went on a family trip to Croatia, and on our way to the beach, we pulled over to the side of a road for a pee break. So we opened the car door, and like always, our dog jumped out first. He ran into the field right next to the street. Then suddenly my mother starts screaming the name of our dog because 10 meters away from our car was a sign that said, "Stay away, old minefield." Thankfully, nothing happened. I'm visiting Chicago from Seattle for a week. I booked an Airbnb with a gentleman who understood that I would be in a household with maybe 5 other people, as he did bunk beds in the room. The Airbnb was marketed as close to trains in a decent area, and the house looked clean with many useful amenities. Upon arriving at the house, I find that it's run down and unclean, with only the sheets being changed by the maid. On top of that, many appliances were broken, and there was no potable water. That was the first strike. Next, there were upward of 15 people staying in the house. That bunk bed situation, he had 5 to 6 rooms with varying amounts of bunk beds squeezed in, and no room to walk. No one in the house knew about the other rooms from the listing. I dropped my things off to explore the city and noticed the neighborhood was a bit sketchy, but thought nothing of it. When I can remember, there was one of our other guests sitting, waiting for an Uber to eat because he was too terrified to walk down the street and get food. Apparently, the night before I arrived, 3 people in the house were mugged while walking 5 minutes from the train to the house. That night, 8 of us sat on the floor of the living room, which seemed like a small dining area, but a lover's couch was placed in there with a broken TV, and heard 2 separate occasions of 8 to 10 gunshots a block away. I immediately moved to a hostel and argued with Airbnb and himself until I received a refund. Mike, screw you. I ended up in an Airbnb in a bad part of Chicago where 3 housemates were mugged and 2 people on the streets were shot. I didn't stay another night. I witnessed a creepy old man groping a teenager on a crowded train in Osaka. The girl was just enduring it, and you could tell that she was holding back her tears. I whipped my phone out and started filming the guy, which made him use his other hand, which was blocked from my view. So I asked my guy friend to switch places with the girl. After that, on the next stop, the creepy guy got off. I asked the girl if she was okay. She thanked us, and her friends also expressed their gratitude. I think all of them, all teenage girls, were aware of the groping, but I read somewhere that it is not the Japanese culture to make a scene. I was aware that this kind of thing was prevalent in Japan, but I'm still shocked to see it in person. That creepy man and the poor girls' faces will be forever etched in my mind. I was traveling by van through the mountains in the Philippines with a friend who's a really big guy. We came up on a checkpoint with soldiers searching cars. The guys are all wearing mismatched clothes and do not have any insignia on their uniforms or trucks. They searched all of our bags and were asking questions of the driver in Tagalog, which we did not speak. We heard them say American, and we're the only 2 Americans on the bus. They talked for a little while and finally waved us through. Later, we told Americans have been kidnapped for ransom lately. They all agreed they would not take us because of the size of my friend. I think we got really lucky that day. 17-year-old me was in a public restroom near the Colosseum in Rome. I was taking a leak at a urinal when some dude rushed into the urinal right next to me and looked over the partition at my junk, and he just started jerking off extremely violently. I just started and had to go something fierce, so I was trying to cover it up, avoid jerking off, and not get pee all over myself. Suddenly, the Roma police came bustling in and grabbed the old boy and started yelling at me in Italian very loudly. As I zip up and throw my hands in the air, I simply say English and American. They demanded to see my passport and then hauled off the jerk-off guy. I've mostly traveled through Europe, and the only time I've ever felt really uncomfortable was when I was groped on the metro in Rome. We were parked in a car, and I felt a hand against my back. No big deal. I live in New York City, it happens. But then the hand slipped between me and the next person and around to near my stomach, or maybe a pickpocket. Well, I had a money belt, so I was okay there. The hand grabbed my breast. It was so tightly packed that I couldn't turn around, and I just froze. I wanted to say stop or don't or anything at all. But in the moment, every word of my Italian fled from my brain, and I felt like a bucket of scalding water had been dumped over my head. The ride felt like it lasted forever. At the next stop, I forced my way out of the car and into the fresh air. Rome is so beautiful, but it felt pretty damn ugly that day. I was working in a poor community in a small village in Romania, helping to build a small extension to a school, and at around dusk I decided to go for a short walk to the local shop for some water when a car drove past me. They suddenly broke down and reversed down the road and stopped beside me, telling me to get into their cars. They wanted to show me their cool things: radios, cars, knives. They kept slowly curb crawling me and demanding I get in the car until I got back to my group, whereby they sped off. For the next couple of days, the same car, I believe, kept driving past and stopping by or stopping outside where we were staying for a 30-minute interval several times a day. I was staying at a good hour away from the village. It's creepy as all hell, and I still believe it could have gone badly. Drunkenly fluctuating between Spanish, French, and English with the two attendants. A girl comes in and tells me that she's found us a ride back to the hostel. I pull myself into a white Escalade, mistake number one. The only people who drive Escalades in Panama are not the people whose Escalade you ever want to find yourself in. And I look at the driver. Imagine your cliche, coked out 40-year-old former trophy wife. This is our driver. She's shit-faced as well. Mistake number two, getting into a drunk foreigner's car. After some driving around, it becomes obvious that the woman is effing mental. She's doing coke while driving, respect where it's due, she didn't spill, and weeping constantly. Me and my gal pal are a little put off and ask to be let out. The driver pulls over, and gal pal, who is sitting in the front, jumps out. I'm just about to follow suit when the driver turns to me and says, "I lost my kids today. Stay with me for a minute." This was 5 years ago, and I have grown up a lot since then, but drunk me decided that I was making a great decision by staying in the car. I'm on the edge of a blackout in a brand new town, and so, for a while, I didn't notice that this drunk woman is driving me out of town. She makes a phone call, and then a few minutes later, pulls the car to the side of the road. I'm not joking when I say the largest man I've ever seen gets into the back of the car. He's Panamanian, thugged out from head to toe. He has dead eyes and coldly stares at me without saying a word. My drunk white Canadian self is sitting in the front seat. Through the liquor haze, my brain is screaming, "Dude, you're in Panama. No one knows where you are. You're alone with this terrifying human who hasn't spoken a word and a clearly effed up trophy wife cokehead." So I pull out my phone, thinking now is a good time to get a hold of my buddy back at our hostel. Effing dead. My phone is dead. Mistake number 3. Never ever go anywhere without having a method of at least getting into contact with the outside world. So we're driving further and further out of town. The houses are getting bigger and spread out. We pull into a house that has Greek columns in the entranceway, and I'm thinking to myself that I've been kidnapped. Walk into the house, and there, sitting at the table, is an American dude with a face scar going from above his right eye down to his lip. It's the angry kind of scar that jumps out at you. The woman who brought me out says she needs to deal with some stuff and leaves me at a table with the Panamanian and the American. I'm thanking God that despite this man's supervillain scar, I finally have a person I can clearly communicate with. The guy immediately starts yelling at me and cursing me out. He drags my ass outside with the Panamanian and starts telling me that this isn't the woman's house and that they aren't friends here. This is her ex-husband's house. He's convinced that she brought me here to F me at her ex's house. I quickly explain the weirdness of the evening. The American calms down, and eventually we get settled and start chatting and drinking a bit. I'm in damage control mode and want the Americans to like me, so I'm drinking and smoking weed and generally trying to be a fun dude. The American gets trashed and starts telling me shit he should not be telling anyone. He tells me that he's a drug runner, places a 1 kilogram bag of coke on the table to prove it, then pulls a handgun out of his waistband to put an exclamation point on the statement. I'm shitting bricks on the inside, but on the outside, I'm all, oh, hey, yeah, cool. American starts to tell me about his time in prison and tells me that he got his scar in prison. Kindly offers to cut my face in a similar way to make a man out of me. I kindly declined, thinking I was legit about to get carved up by a crazy American and Panamanian. At this point, the Panamanian woman comes back out and tells me she needs to talk. We go outside for a cigarette and she says the following. Her: I know what you are. Me: oh? Her: you're an angel. You're an angel who's been sent here to help me kill myself and take me to the other side. Me: what? Her: come with me. Let's go for a drive, just you and me. Me: no thanks. Her: take me to the other side. Me: yeah, right. BRB, LOL. Just kidding. I run inside to the American and tell him what just happened. He offers to drive me home. I say yes, and don't let the effing Panamanian woman drive. The whole drive home, through the deserted, empty countryside, I kept one hand on my seatbelt and the other on the door handle. I expected every second for them to pull off to the road and murder me. So yeah, just about effed up in every possible way. I saw the American on the street a few days later, and he waved like we were brothers. I noped the F out of there. I was in Barbados walking on a main road back to where I was sleeping. It's not far from the main beach on the south side. It was late and dark. I came across this man carrying a white bucket. Hi, I'm Bush. Bush had plants in the bucket. He also had a machete. Do you have any food for me? Some rice? I tell him I do not have any food, but that I do have weed that I could share. I had brought some from a bunch of kids at the beach the night before. Follow me, says Bush. So I follow this man with a machete off the road into an empty lot. At the back of the lot is a back alley heading to the side. We take this alley. A man is sitting, sleeping on a wall. A few broken down cars are parked. It is a dead end. I was wondering earlier whether all this was a good idea, and my mind was beginning to form an opinion along the lines of no. So we get to the end of the alley. He enters a door and brings out 2 chairs. It turns out this is his mom's place. I begin to notice a small garden all around, made from plants that Bush picks up and brings back with his bucket. We light up. He takes first. He coughs. This stuff is shit. You feed this to the sheep.